Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you that will help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. And today I want to share with you some of the top mistakes that I see people making when they are trying to become intuitive eaters. If you're someone who struggled with disordered eating or eating disorders, you've probably heard of intuitive eating. If you don't know what it is, I highly recommend checking out this video where I run through the 10 principles of intuitive eating. And that might make a little bit more sense to watch this video afterwards. So these are mistakes that I've certainly made myself and ones that I see people making over and over again. And now, when I first found intuitive eating, it was actually over a decade ago now. And there was no Instagram, there was no one talking about it on social media at the time. I just stumbled across the book at my local bookshop and I bought it and I read it and I thought, this is amazing. This is the answer to all my problems, and I started practicing the principles. And for a couple of weeks I didn't binge and I felt great and I thought I had fixed my life. And then some point, I don't even remember how it happened, I started binging again. And it felt catastrophic to start binging when I was so convinced that I had solved this problem. It was really distressing. And I just remember thinking that this intuitive eating thing is really good. Like, I still got that intuitive eating was probably a really helpful thing to do. But my belief, and this is the first mistake that I want to share with you, is that belief that I'm too broken to do intuitive eating. I thought, yeah, great, it would work for other people who are struggling with binge eating, but I'm pretty sure I'm the worst binge eater in the world and it can't help me. And often people will think that they need to sort out their relationship with food first or sort out their weight first, and then they will do the intuitive eating thing. But the intuitive eating is a way to heal your relationship with food and to kind of reclaim your connection to your body and allowing your body to settle at the weight that it wants to be. And so my message to you would be, you're not too broken. I know when you're struggling with this, you feel like the worst binge eater in the world. Like, you'll hear other people talking about it and you'll find a reason why yours is worse. And for me, it was like, well, of course I can't do intuitive eating because I'm the kind of person who never sticks at anything anyway. That was my story, I think, for a long time. And so the second mistake that comes up a lot is viewing intuitive eating as the hunger-fullness diet. So this idea that intuitive eating is about only eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're no longer hungry. So some people have said that they don't think they can do intuitive eating because they're not in charge of their meal time, so their life isn't set up in a way that they can only eat when they're hungry. And intuitive eating is not only eating when you're hungry. We talk about honouring your hunger. So what that means, it means not deliberately making yourself go hungry. You know, it's about, sometimes life happens and we do go hungry and we do end up missing a meal or we don't get to get the food at a certain time. But when our intention is to honour our hunger when we can, that's the place that we want to be at. It's all about intention around hunger. And the problem with the hunger-fullness is if you stop, the hunger-fullness diet, I should say, is if you stop the minute you're not hungry, you're going to be hungry again in a couple of hours' time. It's not going to be enough, which is why I really love, I think I've said it before, my favourite principle is the finding satisfaction. So we're supposed to eat and be satisfied. So when we have some hunger to satisfy, food is more satisfying. But also if we eat till satisfaction, we're going to probably eat until we are full. Because we're supposed to eat more than we need in this very moment, because we're supposed to eat to carry us through and give us energy until the next time we eat. So if you stop, if you're trying to only eat exactly what you need now, you're not eating enough to fuel yourself until the next eating opportunity. So intuitive eating is not a hunger and fullness diet. We do talk about hunger and fullness because those are our body's cues, some of our body's cues, about that give us information about when, what, and how much to eat. So of course we're going to talk about them. But it sort of brings me on to the third mistake, is that because people who struggle with binge eating tend to be pretty all or nothing and quite black and white with their thinking, is they want to do intuitive eating perfectly. So they take the principles, and they're called principles, they're not called rules, but they'll take the principles and they'll turn them into rules. And personally, I'm not even a big fan of the word principles. I prefer to use the word intention. I think it's much softer, and I think intention is so important. The intention that we bring to anything is going to have an enormous impact on the outcome and the experience that we have of it, more than just the behaviour on its own. So when you turn those principles into rules, it becomes a bit like a diet, and you feel like you break the rules. So if you eat way beyond fullness and you're feeling uncomfortable, it can feel like that I've blown it thinking can come in again. And it's that I've blown it thinking that really drives that whole restrict diet mentality. It drives binge eating, that feeling that you have screwed up. So now that you've screwed up, you might as well carry on screwing up until you feel like you are able to be great at it again. And so when we think about intention, like let's say the intention is to honour my hunger, and I am busy and I end up over hungry, and then I eat too much because I was over hungry, like I could beat myself up and say I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Or like, well, my intention was to honour my hunger, and sometimes life gets in the way, or sometimes our minds and our emotions take us somewhere else. And with intentions, we can just keep coming back. So intuitive eating is hard to implement with the all or nothing thinking, but you're probably going to start off with the all or nothing thinking, and a bit like intuitive eating being a path to healing your relationship with food, it's also a path to softening that black and white and all or nothing thinking. So it's watching out for that and being careful to try to notice when that might derail your efforts. And then the fourth mistake, I think it's really important to talk about permission. So one of the big things around intuitive eating, and one of the things that in some circles is quite controversial, is the idea of having permission to eat whatever you want, whenever you want. So that's really scary for somebody who binges, because you think, well, I'm going to carry on binging. And it's really interesting what permission does actually, because permission really helps with those moments when you've eaten a few biscuits, or cookies if you're outside of the UK, we call them biscuits. So you've eaten a few biscuits and you thought, oh, I only meant to have one. And now I've eaten a few and I've got the rest of this packet of biscuits and I'm feeling bad about myself. So I know I'll just eat up all the biscuits, and then tomorrow I won't have the biscuits in the house, so I won't be at risk, and I'll get back on track. Permission helps to guard against that, because when you know you have permission to have the biscuits whenever you want, there isn't that same urgency to finish something when you feel like you've blown it. Some people find with permission that as soon as they give themselves permission, there's a significant reduction. And this is particularly true if you are somebody who also practices generally quite a bit of restriction. However, and I see this in like the forums, I see people talking about they've been doing intuitive eating for a few months and they're still binging regularly and they're not restricting. And you'll get lots of really well-meaning people chipping in and saying, just keep going, keep doing it. Oh, they'll be saying as well that they're gaining weight quickly. People say, keep going, don't worry about the weight gain. At some point, it's just going to stop. Now, if food is a particularly emotional thing for you, if it's something you use to numb, distract, or escape from how you're feeling, permission to eat whatever you want can become permission to numb, distract, use food emotionally. Now we need some nuance here, because you do have permission to use food emotionally, and not many people have no emotions around food at all, right? But a lot of people who are struggling with this, they don't want to be turning to food to deal with their emotions all the time. That's one of the things that they want to undo. And if this is you, what it might be is that, yes, I think it's important to give yourself permission to eat whatever you want, whenever you want. But you may not be able to eat however you want. So if you're someone who uses food emotionally, I'm going to almost guarantee that when you binge in front of the TV or on your phone. Probably one of those two. There might be other things you do, but those are the two main ones. So for me, because I relate to this myself, was that permission to eat all my binge foods, but with the binge foods, not with all my food, but with the binge foods, if I were to have them, I had to sit at the table with no distractions. And so for me, it was always sugar. So if I was going to eat sweet foods, it had to be at the table, without the TV, without my phone, just me and the food. And I tell you, it was uncomfortable. But it was interesting because a few times I had a craving for something, and when I was like, yeah, you can absolutely have it, but you need to sit at the table. It was amazing how many times I was just like, actually, it's not about the food. I don't want the food. I want the experience of numbing out, of escaping, of just kind of just checking out for a bit and using food to do that. And I want to say again, there's nothing morally or inherently wrong about doing that. You're trying to take care of yourself, and food has become a way to do that. But if this is something that you really want to undo, this can be a way to do it. And it doesn't even mean it has to be like that forever. I did this probably for a couple of months, and now I can eat these foods in front of the TV because it doesn't have quite the same emotional connection for me. So I think permission, really important, but it needs to come with presence. And permission without presence for some people, if there's a lot of emotions around food, could keep them stuck and keep them caught. So that, I suppose, would be the fourth and final mistake, is kind of around permission and what permission means to you. And that idea of like, and I always say like over and over again, like to people, I don't care what you eat. I care why you eat it and if you are okay with those reasons. Because you get to decide like what reasons you're okay with eating for and what reasons just don't feel congruent, you know. So I hope this video has been helpful to think about some of the ways that people do get tripped up when it comes to intuitive eating. I am an intuitive eating fan, but I think take what works and leave the rest. So you don't, some people are like, oh, it's 10 principles, it's just a lot to remember. It may only be that you just need a couple of principles that work for you. So for me, again, like if focus on like my intention being to feel satisfied with food, that kind of takes care of the rest for me. I don't need to think about any of the others because I want to experience a bit of hunger so I can feel satisfied, but I don't want to be over hungry because then it's hard to be satisfied. I don't want to do much emotional eating because when there's a lot of emotions going on and you eat, that's not particularly satisfying. You soothe the emotions for a bit, but you don't feel satisfied. And it also ties in with the gentle nutrition because certain foods are just naturally more satisfying. So I kind of think it's really easy to think, oh, I've got to go through it like principle by principle and remember them all, and almost like the 12-step program doing the 10-step principles with intuitive eating. But I think pick out the bits that work and don't worry about the rest. You know, you get to decide what kind of relationship you want with food. That's entirely up to you. So on that note, I'll leave it there and I'll see you on the next video.